Okay, shall I just do a very quick intro? Well, a very, very quick intro, because I know that you're more than capable of introducing yourself, Wendy, and do a far better job than I will. But
Great.
just to invite the magical Wendy Lee to create a space for us this evening. I think, Wendy, I've seen more of you than I have done some of my family over the last few weeks. So it's great to have the pleasure to work with you again this evening and for you to share your journey and the magic of learning stories, which I know is truly phenomenal. So thank you very much. Over to you.
Oh, thanks, Fliss. Well, of course, I always love the opportunity to talk about learning stories. It's indeed a passion of mine. Um, and actually, I will start just briefly introducing myself, partly because this is the way we do it in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Um, this is me and my family. You'll also see members of my family on this slide, my mother and my siblings, my partner and husband, and our children, Timothy and Patrick, along with Kelly, our daughter-in-law, and our grandchildren, Miller and Isla. Big event this weekend. It's Isla's 5th birthday, and this is the time that children head off to school. So that is a pretty exciting weekend for us. Kei Kirikiriroa Toku Kāinga. This is my place in Hamilton. Of course, I'm giving you a window of fabulousness because Hamilton is a city in the sort of central part of the North Island, and there are a couple of cities, Hamilton and Palmerston North, who get a bit of a bad rap because we're not beside the sea, basically. So I just always put these sort of images up to show how fabulous the place I live in. And e mihi ana ki ngā tohu o nehi I tēnei rohi o Tainui I noho nei au. I acknowledge the ancestral and spiritual landmarks of the region where I live. And this is, this is an important part of being a part of New Zealand and also being a bicultural teacher, that we don't have just an English curriculum. We have what is a bicultural curriculum, which lends everyone's responsibility to enact Te Reo Māori, the language of Māori, and also our bicultural view of the world. So, ko tēnei taku mihi ki te tangata whenua o te rohi nei. So I acknowledge the Indigenous people of my area. So nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Greetings to you all. So I just start by, in a normal circumstance, obviously we'd have more opportunity to talk to each other. And it is useful for me just to see if people feel moved or motivated to even just to put in the chat what sort of context they're in, who they are. I can see your names as participants, but that doesn't really give me a sense of who you are. But it would be just nice if you just said what sort of context, childcare centre, kindergarten, nursery, that you currently work in, and just to give me a sense of the group. But I will move on, but I will watch the chat throughout to see any sort of contributions, because it's one of the things about Zooms, that it's nice to try and make some connections with each other, because I know we're on the other side of the world, but it doesn't make it impossible to actually engage through the chat, which would be really lovely. Okay. I'm going to start with this quote here because I love this quote. It's one of the ELP favorites from David Perkins. And David was involved in Margaret Carr's as a sort of, I'm not sure he was a supervisor, but she certainly spent a lot of time with him in America as part of doing her PhD. And I think this is it's a pretty fabulous quote. So it's never just routine. It's about thinking about what you know and pushing further. It involves open-ended or ill-structured problems and novel, puzzling situations. It's never just problem solving. It involves problem finding. It's not just about the right answers. It involves explanation and justification. It's not emotionally flat. It involves curiosity, discovery, creativity, and camaraderie. I hope you like it as much as I do. I just think it's a really important quote. And I think that, we have shifted like so much of the world, but not all of the world, that's for sure, in terms of shifts in thinking and practice, which have informed hugely the way we are in terms of assessment practice from this developmental psychology position around developmental theory. The sort of, I know, well, I trained at the end of the 60s, and Piaget was sort of one and only. And it's not to say we're throwing everything out that Piaget ever said, but certainly our perspective and the focus of our assessment has changed significantly, recognizing that developmental psychology was more about focusing on ages and stages, and learning was seen as pretty linear. And that at that time we felt that development drove learning. Well, how the world has changed in its understanding as we've moved towards a socio-cultural theory. So really, I mean, I think that everyone accepts that learning drives development. The more I focus on something, the more it grows, whether I'm 50 or 5 or 2. And it's a focus on transformation through participation with people, places, and things. So learning is seen as complex, situated, and therefore non-linear. And I love this image of this child Effie, who is in Barbara Rogoff's work. And I'm not suggesting that toddlers should have machetes, of course, but it is interesting to see the cultural context that here is a child that has been given a machete to cut a piece of fruit, and he's 11 months old. I mean, it is extraordinary, really. And it makes us ponder, how capable do we see the children within our context, and how visible is that in our practice and also in our assessment. So I think it's a really, really important lens to start thinking about. Now, I realize there've been, a few changes in terms of the sort of documentation that's sitting around you, but still the foundation stage has these very clear ideas of the unique child, positive relationships, enabling environments, and learning and development, which I think is pretty marvelous. And I absolutely see all of this, the foundation stage ideas, definitely totally in sync with the sort of work that we are doing in New Zealand. So it's not significantly different. The lens changes in certain places, but really, when you look at it closely, we all have similar views about how we want to be in relationship with children and their families. I just put these images really to bring the context into frame, because these are the factors that are influencing your work and how you work, and the sort of background that helps you keep focused to what is important in your place. And and likewise, this idea of planning, observation, and assessment, and what that might look like in your context, because obviously you've come onto this webinar because you're interested in the notion of assessment and what that looks like. And one of the things that it feels to me as I read your document, there's a very, very strong focus on responsiveness. And I think that that is the heart of the best in early childhood, that to move away from a sort of institutional view to be present with children and to make that visible through the documentation. And I know there've been in very recent times some very what's the word, significant things that have happened that have changed the way Ofsted are. And looking from the outside, it feels like they've really begun to focus on what matters. I might have a rather rosy coloured spectacle view of that, but I do see there have been some significant changes around thinking about what are we doing and what's important when you consider assessment and the ideas that sit underneath your assessment. How do you understand me? Do you understand how I feel? What I'm interested in? What questions may be in my mind? How I'm approaching my learning? What have I learned and understood? I think all of these things sit behind all of the work that we all do, wherever we are in the world. Now, I have a very strong view around assessment documentation that if you don't use it every day, then you need to lose it, because in the past, too much documentation anywhere in the education system, but certainly in early childhood, has been done purely for the purpose of accountability and has got in the way of teaching lives, really, and children's lives. So to think about your current documentation, how much of it are you using every day for the purposes of enriching and making a better world for the children that you're deeply in relationship with? So I think it looks like this. It looks like documentation that is used by the children, by the teachers, and by the families. So constantly shared and read, and having children having agency over it, being able to put their own things in if they want to, but definitely regularly revisiting it. So for what is the purpose to do all this assessment if not to have an impact on the identity of the child as a learner? And so if your documents truly turn into documents that you can read to the children, I think is a really important part of not only about things like building learner identity, but also about early literacy and communication. And these documents should be as important, if not more important, than the books that you share with children in your early childhood settings. So delivering wise practice with assessment. And of course, I'm totally committed to this notion of the story form, because it is a cultural universal. Everyone, everywhere has told and enjoyed stories. They are one of the greatest cultural inventions for catching and fixing meaning. And I can't not go past saying how important Margaret Carr has been in this whole development. When this first emerged, the notion that we should have a new form of assessment. Now we had a new curriculum called Te Whāriki, which, at that time was revolutionary, moved away from having the subject areas of school, maths and literacy, etc., 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 to a frame of belonging and well-being, contribution, communication, and exploration. And because of the shape and the change of the curriculum, we knew that we had to do assessment differently. And Margaret won the contract to look at what might assessment look like, and I was involved with her in that early research. And I have obviously been involved in that relationship with Margaret ever since. And I can't not share with you that for me, the wisdoms and insights that I've gained from Margaret have been absolutely immeasurable, and I feel immense responsibility to honour her work, because clearly her work has shaped my journey, and I'm deeply grateful to her for that. And I am driven by a passion to uphold the integrity of the work of learning stories and share it with anyone who's interested. So when we look at learning stories, it's not a format, it's a philosophy of assessment. And I think it's a much bigger than just sitting down and doing assessment. It is about the values that we hold as well. So formative assessment, the ways in which in our everyday practice, we, families, children, teachers and others, observe children's learning, notice, strive to understand it, recognize, and then put our understanding to good use. And this has obviously just been adapted from Professor Mary Jane Drummond's work, who I first met at Penn Green many, many years ago. And she's been, that her view of assessment is very, very aligned to our view of assessment. And this notion of the responsive funnel, we talk it sort of. In the early days, it was just these first three. We notice a lot as early childhood and practitioners. We recognize the learning and we respond. So trying to get teachers away from, setting activities, but really being in a responsive environment to children, to be present with them, to notice what they're doing, to recognize the importance and to respond, not next week, but now in this moment. And we've consequently developed that to obviously the recording, the documenting, then the power and importance of revisiting the documents, and of course, reviewing. So for those of you who are new to learning stories, there are a number of premises about the nature of learning and assessment that underpin the learning stories philosophy. And I'm not going to go into that in great detail, but these premises have and do represent substantial shifts in thinking that have occurred in education research over the years. And these ideas are, for instance, that objectivity, none of us are objective. To sit there and think that we're objective is naive, and there is so much research that proves that it's virtually impossible to be objective. But that objectivity is enhanced through multiple perspectives being visible. So learning stories written by a number of or I should say practitioners is important. There may be stories written by families, and also there may be stories written by siblings or anyone else in the context. Sometimes we've had cooks writing stories, which has been pretty jolly fabulous. So narrative is a credible form of documenting lives, well experienced in many other disciplines beyond education. What it means to be a learner is valued as well as knowledge and skills, because in the past, knowledge and skills have been in the front frame. And for us now, being a learner in the 21st century and what that looks like is very, very important. We know we can't have one without the other, but the disposition to learn is a very important part of what we do. Teaching as well as learning is important to document, because it's through the voices of teachers and practitioners that we're sharing that not only with children but with family and families, so that they understand the ways in which we're working, which as well, those of you who are involved in Pen Green know the importance and power of engaging deeply the parents in this process. And of course, perhaps the most challenging from the very beginning was the focus of assessment is on strengths and interests, not needs. And this comes from a place of enormous research around the power of focusing on the best in everyone. It doesn't matter whether you're an adult or a child, but when you begin to focus on the strengths and the interests, the passions and the spirit of the child, it changes everything for many children. So I think that that particular aspect, when we at the very beginning we said to teachers, try to remove needs from your view and get strongly focused on the best in each of these children. And it has had a profound impact on children's lives. So this just gives you an idea of the sort of framework that we're using from our curriculum to whāriki, starting with the strands on one side, moving across to the learning dispositions, and then thinking about some of the actions and behaviors that we were wanting to frame, that watching children, are they taking an interest? Are they being involved? Are they persisting with challenge and difficulty and uncertainty? Are they able to express a point of view or feeling, or in what ways are they taking responsibility? Now, these actions and behaviors, which are really the learning dispositions in action, are not obviously the entire focus, but they are critical to building a lifelong learner. And that's what we're really interested in. So in order to do that, you have to have an environment that's interesting, trustworthy, challenging, listening, and collaborative. And I think that when Margaret developed the children's questions, it really took people straight to the child. If you have a child looking at you thinking, do you know me? Can I trust you? Do you let me fly? Do you hear me? Is this place fair for us? and you honestly answer that question. And, for us, like in New Zealand, for instance, is this place fair for us? A simple question in many early childhood settings would be, are the doors open? It might sound like a very superficial question, but it's a significant question. Because if you ask the children, did they want to be inside or outside? Most children actually want to be outside. And so often the doors in early childhood settings get closed, not because of the interest and passions and spirit of those children, but because teachers don't want to go outside. And I'm talking about any weather, and being prepared for weather so children can go inside and outside. And I'm always reminded of John Bennett from OECD, who's no longer with us, when I was working in Singapore, and he was too. And he said to this very large group of teachers, very, very large group of teachers, do not steal the childhood of the child. And I think it's a really good mantra to keep in view, that we don't need to institutionalize very small children. We really need to think deeply about whether this childhood is being honored in the way it needs to be. So we are all hardwired to learn by imitation. And I think this is a quote. It's a quote for teachers and practitioners, as well as a quote for children. So we are built to learn by imitation. Evolution has equipped us with the brains that are designed from the moment of birth to what people around us are doing. When a baby sees you make a fist or a smile, the neurons in her brain make her ready to do the same thing. It's through this kind of unconscious osmosis that children learn the habits of language and culture into which they have been born. Without any instruction like from us, their brains start molding themselves to the social world around them. They pick up the speech sounds and accents they hear and the emotional reactions they see being molded. By watching us, they are learning to be frightened of what we are frightened of, to ignore what we ignore, and to find funny what we laugh at. And in just the same way, they learn to learn in the way their parents, carers, and teachers learn. If they grow up around people who love debate around the dinner table, they will imbibe the habits, rules, and pleasures of debating. If they watch adults being experimental, inquisitive, and tenacious in their learning, these habits will rub off too. If their role models have no time for ideas or become angry the minute their efforts are frustrated, that too is what they will learn. So we need to be careful to be at our learning best around young children, especially if they like or admire us, for their heroes are the people whose habits they will find most contagious. Capitalizing on this rubbing off of learning habits gives us a powerful way of influencing children's development for good or ill. I don't know what you think, but I think it's a very, very powerful quote to think about. I've just realized that I've had the chat hidden, so I thank you for the people who just let me know what they were into and where they were from. So sorry, I missed all that. I've just noticed it up there, so I appreciate that. And when Margaret, in her first book on assessment, in the very early part of the research, she wrote this: when we began, I think the practitioners and I wanted to seize the notion of assessment, shake it around a bit, turn it upside down, and find something that was part of enjoying the company of young children. And I don't know anyone who wouldn't agree that that was a very important statement of what assessment might look like in your place. And we have this whakatauki, it's like a proverb that sits beside our curriculum that says, let the uniqueness of the child guide our work. So it's not about us driving it, it's actually about the uniqueness of the child. And I'm sure that this is central to your curriculum as well as ours. And I say, in order to do this powerfully, you must engage your heart and your mind. So I do, I have said from the very beginning, it is about finding the magic, but it's not magical in this magical sense. It's like about making the ordinary extraordinary. Writing because it matters, not just because you have to do it, because it's some way of proving learning rather than improving learning. So at the heart of learning stories is a strong, strength-based approach, a deep curiosity in the child's lived experience. And, you know, for me, it is about slowing down the pace so you see these moments, listening some more, being present, and writing with wonder, joy, and energy, whatever is important in this place at this moment. And I love when Carla Rinaldi talks about documentation, she says it's an act of love through which you go close to the child and also you discover your learning processes as a teacher to learn more about what it does mean to be a teacher. And Carla also talks about the steps and traces of learning. And she also discusses in length about the richness of the material that we document. It can be shown to the child, she talks about that, and also to the teachers and especially the parents. So it's in this way, I guess, that the participants can find the beauty not only in their child, but also in that wider learning community. And I think that's what learning stories are about, a wider community where you share the stories, in different contexts. For instance, in an immersive Māori context, mana tamariki, where they write learning stories, which they call paki ako, which is the Māori word for learning stories. And every story they write about every child in that early childhood context goes into every child's portfolio. So it's also about strengthening Te Reo Māori, their language, so that all the parents can read all the children's stories. But it's about this act of community, that we are interested in everyone, and every story is strength-based and tells important stories of learning for all to learn about. I mean, that's truly, when Carla says to find the beauty of being part of a learning community, that's a place that truly transports this into reality. So I'm going to have a look at a learning story, and I'm sharing some of the stories that I've put inside the blog it will be on the site, attuned to this particular webinar. And I've shared in that blog, I've shared several of Carter's stories, and I thought it was nice for you to see a number of stories in the same portfolio to get a sense of the sort of documentation that is happening. Now, today I decided not to go for short stories because I wanted to give you a sense of sort of an aspirational way to view learning stories, because it's not having many, many stories for every child. It's about stories that matter, because these stories will be read for generations. We know that now because it's already happening, and people are coming back to us decades later to talk about how powerful and important the stories were and how often they have been revisited through the child's life. So I want to start with the story of Carter's that is a very early story inside his portfolio. In fact, it might be the first one, apart from the welcome stories and the early ones when he first started. And it's a focus that began before he started kindergarten, because he would come with his older brother and would obviously spend time in the environment. So this is what the story looks like. It's lots of images. And that's what it looks like in the portfolio. So it's those 3 pages. And I'm going to go through the 3 parts of the learning story. And I want you to think about, as you listen to the story, think about what it's like for Carter to be read the story early on, and what it might be like when he's older, what it's like for the parent to read the story. So just in framing this sort of the learning story for those of you who are new to learning stories, the first part of the learning story is the actual story, the narrative, the title, the story, and the photos. It's really about what did you observe, what excited you, what delighted you, what made you want to write the story? And it's a response to what you saw. So every story is based on your own subjectivities, and it's about valuing those subjectivities. We know that practitioners strengthen children's learner identities when writing sits inside a learning context, not abstract, but real experience, carefully and sensitively written from a perspective of a teacher who cares deeply about this child. And more often than not, but not exclusively, it's addressed directly to the child. So I want you to consider, as you listen to the story, from your perspective, what learning is happening here. Um, and maybe you might take a few notes as you go, and think about, uh, what do you value, in this story? What would you be bringing into the foreground? Remember, there's no wrong answers here. And I'd be very happy if some of you managed to put, as you thought about it, if you wanted to write anything in the chat. So here goes. Carter's passion. Okay. Carter, we have known long before you even officially started at kindergarten that working in the sandpit was an absolute passion of yours. Each and every day you spend long and sustained periods of time in this area, working on ideas and projects and collaborating with friends. Gian is a new friend who loves the sandpit almost as much as you do, almost, but not quite. And today the two of you work together on a shared idea. The idea was to dig a pool for the water to flow in. You did this in one part of the sandpit, and once you were satisfied by how deep it was, the two of you headed over to the next water spot. This time you made a small river and then dug the pool, and as you worked, you chatted to each other, or you chatted about what you were doing. You shared your ideas, and Gian listened, and Gian shared his ideas, and you listened. Sharing ideas and listening are important parts of friendship, Carter. A new day begins. So this story is obviously traveling over more than one day. The next day, you made a deep pool for the sea creatures to swim in. You had an idea of using a bamboo channel, which you placed under the tap and watched as the water flowed down it and created a waterfall-like feature. What a great idea, Carter. Gian thought it was a great idea too and came over to join in with your plan, and the two of you dug your hole even deeper. Another new day begins. Another new day begins and brings with it an opportunity for a group project. Karen had turned both of the taps on full flow, and this began to make a really big river. You worked with lots of friends to dig the trench. I could see that you were enjoying this big group challenge, Carter, working alongside lots of friends, sharing your ideas and working towards a shared goal. You dug and dug and dug, and you all soon created a big river that joined up to make an island in the middle. With the hard work done, you found a good spot in the river and hopped in, immersing yourself in the water and beginning your own imaginative game with some dolphins. A piece of pumice served as a boat, and your dolphins had a great time sailing around the river. So I want you to think about, what do you think about the learning in this context? What sort of ideas can you come up with? I just want you, I'm going to put this back on this next slide on here, which hopefully you can see the whole story actually just written there. So I want you to think about what learning you identify here. Remember, this is subjective. There's no one way and no one way of viewing this. The ideas are about the values you hold. Each community sets its own philosophy and values. Each context sets its own values. Think about your curriculum, think about schema, think about dispositions. Remember, you're building the identity of the learner. So let's see if I can see if any of you are brave enough and courageous enough to put your ideas of what learning is happening here in the chat. That would be fabulous. This is a very critical part of the learning story, and it doesn't actually become a learning story until you start analyzing and thinking about the learning. So this is in a sense the heart of the learning story, as you start to interrogate and think, what was important about this learning experience for Carter, and why did I think it was so important to document? And I know it's just an academic exercise for you to be saying that and asking you to do that, but it's an important one. Thank you, Leslie. Well done. I like how Carter is returning to the activity and building on previous ideas and working with this new friend, and then the other children being involved too. Absolutely. And I think it's another way of documenting to show that continuity over time, even albeit a short period. Okay, I'm going to share with you. Oh, well done, Mary. Great. He's showing his trajectory schema, how the water moves. He's showing determination in his play, concentration, and having his own ideas. Fabulous. Thank you very much. It's brilliant. But I think it's a really interesting thing if you're interested in doing learning stories, to, in your staff meetings, to bring a scenario, an episode of learning, and then get everyone to brainstorm what are the possibilities for learning, what's important in our place, what do we want to bring through and make visible for this child and for this family. And I think that strengthening this is what makes learning stories powerful for teachers, because it makes them more articulate about learning and about being able to articulate what is important in our place. It just has this power to deepen and strengthen these ideas. Okay, let's see what Karen had to say about the learning now. Oh, okay, now that's not moving. Let's find out why. Okay. So I want to say that, reiterate the separation too of the learning story framework that we started at one point blending the story with the assessment analysis with the planning, and now we have returned after research with parents who said they absolutely loved the separation and the focus on learning, because it was enlightening for them. And it also gave such a sense of the importance of things that they didn't think were important. They often didn't think playing in the sandpit was it was just a great thing for children to do, and didn't see it as an important part of learning. So strengthening our analysis has always been incredibly important for us, and making it visible to the family. So let's now look at what Karen had to say. So what learning do I see happening for Carter? Carter absolutely loves working in the sandpit. Not a day goes by when he doesn't engage deeply in this interest. And this is a place where so much rich and meaningful learning is happening for him. I can already see that Carter is a curious learner who becomes involved in things that interest him. While working in the sandpit, Carter is exploring important mathematic and scientific habits of mind, such as curiosity, trial and error, playing around with ideas, and cause and effect. What fabulous concepts to be learning about while engaged in something he loves so much. We know that children's learning is enhanced by participating actively in opportunities that involve collaboration with peers and contributing their thoughts and ideas. This is what I notice happening for Carter as he works on different projects and ideas in the sandpit each and every day. This is a great opportunity for Carter to continue developing important strategies and skills such as turn-taking, listening to others' ideas, and conversation skills. These are skills needed for initiating, maintaining, and enjoying friendships. Children learn through play, by doing, asking questions, interacting with others, devising theories about how things work, and then trying them out. As they engage in exploration, they begin to develop attitudes and expectations that will continue to influence their learning throughout life. That's obviously a quote from our curriculum, Te Whāreki. This quote From the exploration strand of Te Whāriki, our early childhood curriculum describes Carter's way of being while he's working in the sandpit. So, any thoughts about that as an analysis for Carter to listen to, but also for the family? I'll now go on to the third part of the learning story, which is really the formative assessment part. This is the part that we're really starting to think about the planning. Originally, we used to call it the what next, but then we realized this had a lack of responsiveness. So we removed to opportunities and possibilities because we didn't want to set the specific instruction, but rather be responsive to the child because it could actually change in the next few days. And there have been a variety of headings for this particular aspect, and it continues to develop. But we've definitely moved away from the individual teacher thinking about planning by herself to a notion that it's what are we, not just as the teacher who wrote the story, but the learning community going to do to support this child's learning. So here is how might we all stretch and nurture this learning further? What are the possibilities? You know, we're thinking about this for this child, and what are we going to make visible? And now we'll listen to what Karen has to say in this final part of the learning story. So Carter, how will we stretch and grow this learning further? Carter, we will continue to support and encourage your absolute passion for being in the sandpit, fully immersed in water. We will encourage you to develop your strategies for initiating and enjoying friendships with your peers who share the same interests as you. I look forward to seeing where this passion will lead you next, Carter. So I know I have no idea what you're thinking actually, because I'm not in the room with you. But for us, what could be more satisfying than to share a learning story like this with the child and their family? It's a gift, a learning story that brings into view the child's learner identity in such a fabulous way, a story that will be read and reread for many years to come, making visible this child's learning journey. So, you know, this is what successful documentation looks like. And you go into settings in New Zealand and children rush to give you their book. They want to sit down and they want to read their portfolio to you. They want to share them, revisit them, and listen to the stories of others. And in so doing, the community is strengthening and learning from each other. So these stories are woven into the fabric of the early childhood setting. And for me, it is about seizing the joy. Joy is catching. If you love being with children, if you believe in what you teach, your children will be engaged, be motivated, and you will find a deep appreciation and a love of learning. So I'm just going to show you a follow-up story that's been written. So you just get a sense it's not just one story. There are stories and there's continuity to these stories. So this is working together. Carter, and again, this is Nadine writing the story, another teacher in the context. Carter, you just love, love, love being in the sandpit, and each kindergarten day you spend time working on one project or another. Today you joined your friend Johan to create a river in the sandpit. The water was flowing down the riverbed, and you and Johan had used spades to dig a path from the river to flow through. Once the digging was done, Johan went and got a digger and shared his plan with you, Carter. Johan said that his idea was to make the digger dig a big hole in the river and to make a swimming pool. Oh, yes, you said to Carter, liking the sound of that idea. Make a big, big, big swimming pool, you added as the two of you set the digger to work. You helped by scooping up more sand and water and placing it on the digger to take away. You and Johan worked together for such a long time on your plan, Carter, fully engaged in your play and enjoying each other's company. What learning do I see happening for Carter? Carter, children's learning is strengthened through sharing their thinking and engaging in experience with others who love to explore and discover. Working with your friend Johan, a trusted companion, supporting your thinking and exploration as you played around with your ideas, Carter. As the two of you worked together, you communicated by verbally expressing your ideas and thoughts. and also non-verbally, just by the act of doing and watching. Building and developing a responsive and reciprocal relationship together. Learning alongside friends makes us happy, and when we are engaged in meaningful and purposeful challenges, working with a trusted companion makes the learning experience even richer. And to the parents, Hannah and Zembang, Carter's interest in working in the sandpit is proving a valuable opportunity for him to develop and strengthen his communication skills. As I watched Carter working alongside his friend Johan today, Carter took up lots of opportunities to verbally communicate his ideas, and this is a great way for him to practice and develop his language. One of the learning outcomes in the communication strand to Whāreki is for children to become increasingly capable of understanding oral language and using it for a range of purposes. It's great to see Carter beginning to express his ideas in social experiences. So how will we stretch this and grow this learning further? Carter, in your previous sandpit learning story, I wrote for you Carter's passion. I talked about how we will support you and initiate and enjoy friendships while you're involved in your interest. This is a great example of this in action. Keep communicating your ideas to your friends, Carter. This will add complexity to your play. So I think the important thing is to remember, I mean, today we've only got time to look at a learning story, a single learning story, but learning stories are not limited to a single learning story. They've embarked on quite a journey encompassing a whole philosophy of documentation. Like, first we have the classic, obvious learning stories capturing the unique journeys of individual children, and then we expand our horizons with group or community learning stories, celebrating collective experiences within a group setting. We also embrace stories from home, inviting families to share their perspectives and contributions to their children's learning. We value the family voice, providing a platform for families to express their insights and aspirations and share their stories. And of course, we honor the most important voice of all, the child's voice. Their thoughts, ideas, and reflections bring these narratives to life. There are also welcome stories, warmly inviting children into the learning environment. And let's not forget the teachers and practitioners. They have their own stories too. Teachers' stories sometimes reflect their personal lives and their relationships and help build a reciprocal community of learners. So teachers are also writing about other teachers as a powerful way to celebrate teaching lives. So, learning stories are not just a singular tale. They are a rich tapestry of narratives that weave together the voices and experiences of children, families, and teachers. And together, this documentation creates a comprehensive and vibrant picture that truly captures the essence of learning and growth. I think, this notion of being responsive. I mean, I think that it changed everything for teachers in New Zealand, that to move away from setting up activities and just navigating these, to stop that and to start just noticing what children are doing, to recognize the importance and to respond. And lots of teachers, I remember, when they first involved with learning stories, they said it was like a homecoming, a return to the essence of why they actually went teaching, to revel in the joy of children's company as curious companions, and to be genuinely interested in their voices. And I think in that process, something really magical has unfolded. And in the moments of being with children, connections have been deepened, insights have been gained, and authentic learning has really blossomed. So it's a reminder that the true art of teaching lies in the ability to truly see, hear, and respond to the wonders that unfold within each child. So always going back to this notion of let the uniqueness of the child guide our work. And when you have a chance to look at the blog, you will see there are, like, for instance, this story here is Pea Shooters Inspire Literacy Learning, and I think it provides just another insight into the range of things that Carter's involved in, and how over his time in this early childhood setting, he was able to really engage deeply in learning stories. Or this very, when he began to get very interested in the glue gun area, or the tinkering area, where he began really exploring possibilities to create, and began to create all these amazing uh, artifacts of some kind. Here they are. You can get a sense of it there. And that story, again, that was a story that went over several days. And at the end, there was this like Carter's design gallery of the sorts of things he had been creating in that space. So I guess for me, every day you can make a difference. Learning stories will communicate what you value. And I love this quote from Carla Rinaldi. It's a difficult path that requires effort, energies, hard work, and sometimes suffering, but it also offers wonder, amazement, joy, enthusiasm, and passion. It's a path that takes time. So remember, it's about building identity as a learner as a central goal to assessment and learning. And for us, learning stories and documentation have the power to strengthen relationships, to demonstrate deepening reflection, to make learning visible, to make your pedagogy visible, to value others, to strengthen the relationship with families, and to strengthen learning community, and of course, to raise professionalism in our sector. Crafting impactful learning stories means that you will forever be woven into the tapestry of children's lives. I have no doubt that many of the stories teachers in Kayako have penned will be passed down through generations, with these children reading them to their own grandchildren. Just imagine the incredible legacy and lasting impact of these stories, carrying the essence of their experiences and their growth. And in those cherished moments, as the pages of these stories are turned and the words come alive once again, the bond between past and present, between teacher and learner, remains unbroken. It is a testament to the power of our words and the profound influence we have in shaping the narrative of a child's journey. So, if you have or intend to embark on the beautiful task of writing learning stories, or are already engaged in this practice, remember that your words have the potential to transcend time and touch lives in many ways that you will never fully comprehend. Your stories will be cherished and treasured, forever connecting you to the hearts of those who have nurtured you along that learning path. So I just really want to say, one of my favorite things to say is write stories that make a difference. Recognize the privilege it is to enter children's lives in this way. This is the trace of your professional life. And for those of you, if any of you want there's some free access on our website to some webinars if you want to have a look at them on learning stories. Some of them are quite short, and they just might give you some different insights into different aspects of learning stories. And we also have a private Facebook page, which you can enter. You just have to say why you want to be there. So we just make sure that the people who are entering the space are indeed people who are interested in learning stories. And you can ask questions about learning stories, or even share stories. So I think we're there. So any questions, and anything that anyone would like to say? I think I've done pretty good on timing, Fliss.
You've been spot on, I have to say. Sorry, I was scribbling ideas and thoughts down as you were speaking, Wendy. Thank you so much. It was just like I could just listen to you forever talk about it, and it's just so nice to spend an evening thinking about children, and also, you know, the teachers. When you said about your professional life, it made me think about my son's learning stories that we've got from Pengreen, and we still read them as a family. And you're right, some of the practitioners are no longer at Pengreen, but it is it's remembering the relationship he had with those practitioners as well, and the relationship I had with those practitioners. It's so powerful.
Mm.
It goes back to your earlier statement in terms of, learning drives development. So thank you.
Mm.